As we're developing our teaching plans, one of the hardest strategies can be figuring out how are we going to teach content in a new and exciting way. We always want to make sure our teaching strategies are aligned with the objectives, but sometimes we get comfortable. We can get accustomed to the same teaching strategies that we've always used. Well, in this snapshot, we are wrapping up our final session, so we're closing the loop on Kolb's experiential learning theory and what are those learning styles associated with each phase. If this is the first time you're tuning in to hear more about Kolb experiential learning theory, we have been exploring this really important learning style and learning framework over the past several weeks. Okay, so this is our fourth snapshot where we have explored this really important learning theory. And if you're returning for another snapshot, we're delighted that you're back. Welcome everybody to Dr. Sellers Educate, where our mission is to support all nurse educator colleagues to achieve excellence in the classroom, the clinical, and the skills lab setting, and also to help you achieve success on the NLN exam. We want you to subscribe to this channel so you'll be notified right away, and click the bell button as well every single time there's a new snapshot, which usually happens every week. Make sure that you print out your study worksheet. That's always step number one, is to print out that study worksheet. Step number two is to pull out your resources. In this snapshot, we're primarily using Billings and Halstead. That will be page 30. And then in Dr. Caputi's C&E review book, there's also some really good important information on page 35 as it relates to the teaching strategies we want to integrate to help connect the concepts to our students in a way that allows them to apply this information. We are going to do something different. Speaking of trying new and exciting strategies, I do want you to turn to page 35 in Dr. Caputi's review book, and I want you to take a look at scenario 2.2. This is the second edition. This is chapter 2, and we know that with Dr. Caputi's book, her chapters pretty much align with each of the competencies, except for the revisions that were done to the blueprint in 2023. So there is some misalignment in chapter 5 and 6, but you can follow along and make sure that you are reviewing the content that you need to once you get to chapter 5 and 6, well, 5 through 8 really in Dr. Caputi's review book. So for this snapshot, I want you to focus on page 35, okay? And then I want you to take a look at scenario 2.2. What I want to bring to your attention related to this scenario is the two questions that are listed in that scenario. Okay, so it asks you to consider identifying one teaching strategy that would address each of the Kolb's learning styles. Well, that's exactly what we have been doing on our 4-week journey now, as we have explored all 4 types of Kolb's learning styles. And then the second assignment that I want you to add to your study worksheet for this snapshot is to take a concept from a course you teach and draft an instructional plan for moving a learner from a concrete experience to abstract conceptualization. We start, which we're going to do an activity in a second, but we know that Kolb's experiential learning cycle and his theory really focuses on the initiation of learning happening once we've had that concrete experience. Okay, that's the feeling component of Kolb's experiential learning theory. All right, so that's what I want you to do as your follow-up assignment as you debrief from the content review today. And next, we're going to take a look at a pre-assessment. Okay, so we're going to use our iPad like we did in a previous snapshot. And if you have not watched the snapshot where we did that, I encourage you to take advantage of the resources that you have. If you use Zoom as your technology, using what I like to call a virtual whiteboard is a great opportunity that Zoom allows us to use. Okay, and so what you're going to do is, I recommend just plugging in your iPad with a connector. The reason why I like just plugging it in is because it allows you to have direct connection. We know that with technology, it doesn't always work perfect, but if you at least have it plugged in, then you're more likely to have a stable connection, okay? And then what you do on Zoom is you simply click sharing. So what you're doing is you are sharing a screen. So you just click that button at the bottom, and then you're going to choose option iPhone/iPad via cable. Okay, and then that's it. Once you click share, then you should start sharing your iPad. All right, voila. So this is our whiteboard that we're using for our time together today. I want you to use your study worksheet, or you can just pull out a sheet of paper, write down the date, today's date, whatever you're watching, whatever date you're watching the snapshot. And then second of all, I want you to write down your objective. Now that we've talked a little bit about what our focus will be today, I want you to write down what is it that you want to take away from your time here. Time is our most valuable asset. We can't get it back. So once it's gone, it's gone. And we want you to invest your energy and your effort at the highest level every single time you tune in for a snapshot. How do you do that? By taking notes. And we're starting with the pre-assessment. So what I want you to do first and foremost is just go ahead and draw a circle. Okay, and this circle is really going to be your pie. I like to kind of draw it as a circle, and then you're going to divide your pie into 4 different sections. Okay, and also with your pie, I want you to go ahead and start filling in the blanks. Now, I only want you to fill in the blanks with information that we've already covered. We always start with our true north. And what is our true north? Concrete experience. Okay, and then I want you to write down what is the actual verb associated with concrete experience. Next, I want you to go ahead and write down reflective observation. Same thing. What is the verb associated with reflective observation? The next phase associated with Kolb experiential learning theory that we've already talked about, that we will close the loop on today, is related to abstract conceptualization. And you guessed it, I want you to write down the verb associated with abstract conceptualization. And then we have our last one, which is abstract experimentation. And there's a verb associated with that one as well. The other part of your pie, I want you to go ahead and write down, is going to be the 4 different learning styles. Our first learning style that we've talked about has been accommodating. Okay, and then the next learning style that I want to point out is the one that I most frequently align my mindset, my teaching strategies with, which is assimilating. The third learning style is going to be diverging. Okay, so that one lives here. And then the one we're going to talk about today is converging. Okay, and then as a follow-up action item, part of your homework, that should go on your study worksheet as well, I want you to think about what are the teaching strategies that I'm going to incorporate to help my diverger that lives here in between the concrete experience and reflective observation. Okay, and then today, we're going to fill in the blank right here about what specific teaching strategies are aligned with the learner who is between abstract conceptualization and active experimentation. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to talk through what happens for that learner that lands with abstract conceptualization, that phase of learning. What type of teaching strategies do I need to develop to help my learner who reaches abstract conceptualization move through the next phase and to the next phase, which is abstract experimentation? Okay, and what helps our learners move is by engaging in these teaching strategies of what happens oftentimes, which is that converging experience that we'll further explore today. All right, so that's what I want you to do as part of your follow-up, your homework, your debrief, is to write out these activities, okay, for each of these different learning styles. And then I want you to come back and draw another pie. I want you to continue to draw your pie, divided into 4 sections, and just write out the content that we're talking about until you reach that 80% threshold where you feel that you are confident and competent to be able to engage in this type of really assessment, self-assessment of where you are between now and the time, at least a week before you take the C&E exam. Now, for those of you that have been on the journey for a while, then you know that within the last 5 days of you taking the exam, following our 7-week study plan, we don't want you to touch the content. Okay, by that point, we want you to feel confident that you have done the heavy lifting, that you've used the right resources that is going to help you achieve success on a C&E exam. One of the consistent areas of feedback we hear from nurse educator colleagues after they take the exam is that experience was not enough to help them achieve success. We have heard that consistently. That's right, 100% of colleagues who give us feedback after they complete the C&E exam, we don't breach confidentiality, but we like to ask two questions. Did you feel prepared, and were you surprised? Okay, and one of the, I think those colleagues that join us on a journey, one point that they make every single time consistently is, there is no way I would have been prepared for this exam had I not studied. That my experience in the classroom was great, but combining that with studying these evidence-based resources, Billings and Halstead, right now we're in the 6th edition because that's most aligned with the exam based on the feedback from NLN, and Dr. Caputi's C&E review book. You don't need any other resources, okay? These are the only textbooks that you need. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition to Poll Everywhere. That is a type of interactive activity, also called ARS, which is automatic response system, or a type of active response system that helps our learners better connect with the content. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about Poll Everywhere and do a little bit of behind the scenes experience. You're going to be able to actively engage with your learners in a way that's exciting and different. What we love about Poll Everywhere, and it's just one of the interactive activities, but you can actually ask your audience to participate by using texting. So they can text to code 37607. They would send Bridget Sale 263 as an example that we're using today. And then you could also copy and paste pollev.com, that link, that hyperlink, so that participants can respond that way. And then the most exciting, innovative way is by using the QR code. Now, because some of you may be live, others may not, the poll may not be active when you're actually participating. But let's take a look at the thought-provoking question. The nurse educator is incorporating different evidence-based strategies in their classroom. Which of the following is an example of a humanistic teaching practice in nursing education? If you're not familiar with humanism, what I encourage you to do is take a look at Chapter 14 in Billings and Halstead and Table 14.1. This is where you're going to find a lot of information about learning theory. This is an area you do need to ensure that you're knowledgeable about as you prepare for the C&E exam. So I'm going to give you all a few seconds to look at the three options, which are A, allowing students to share clinical experiences in small groups; B, to utilize the flipped classroom model to engage students; or C, using standardized tests to validate learning and meeting outcomes. All right, so I'm going to give you a few seconds just to take a look at content related to this question and to reflect on what you think the question is asking. So that's first and foremost. And then the second point I want you to remember is, what is it that I know for sure about content related to this question? All right, so hopefully you've written your answer down. And then Poll Everywhere gives you the option to click on correctness. You also can hide the responses if you don't want to share them as you're getting feedback from your audience. You can click on instructions. And then when you click on responses, that's when it will take you to what I like to call the barometer chart. So you can see as your respondents are entering their choice, you will see what the percentage is for each of the choices. Okay, and then the last tab is the correctness. So if you chose A, allowing students to share clinical experiences in small groups, excellent work. Give yourselves a round of applause. That is the best option. And let's talk about the rationale for why B and C are not correct options. When you are going through our thought-provoking questions, remember that's exactly what they are. We want you to think about what the rationale is for the incorrect answers, especially if you choose the correct one. Now, with this specific thought-provoking question, you have to understand what humanism is and some of those underpinnings associated with that theory. And so when you look at utilizing the flipped classroom model to engage students, well, that may be a good strategy, but you always want to keep looking to see which is the best answer. Oftentimes on a C&E exam, you're going to have two good answers, but only one correct or best answer, just like NCLEX, right? Just like what we tell our students. And then C, utilizing standardized tests to validate learning and meeting outcomes. Well, standardized tests really are not aligned with the humanistic learning theory. Flipped classroom, now we want to go back and look at the other options. Flipped classroom, we don't have enough information to really make a strong connection between this option B and humanism. So let's take a look at A, allowing students to share clinical experiences in small groups. That tells us that there's going to be human interaction, that there's going to be collaboration, that there's going to be conversation, that there's probably going to be some relatability, right? So all of these elements are strongly aligned with the humanistic learning theory and teaching practices we want to integrate into the classroom. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our content for our time together, and then we'll go back to our thought-provoking question that we have pre-developed for our time together, and then we will look at that answer together before we move on to our last content area. Our focus today is exploring the differences between abstract conceptualization and abstract experimentation. How do we partner with our learners so we can unlock their full potential to achieve success in the classroom and in the clinical setting as well? So this is why we are calling this snapshot closing the loop. We've talked about, after our time together in this snapshot, all 4 different phases of Kolb's experiential learning cycle. So how do we keep students moving through? You can see here on the screen that one example is with case studies, being able to engage students in exploring data to identify and really tap into their knowledge. So they're in a position of analyzing and assessment content that they are given in order to make decisions about patient care and what their next steps are going to be. Now, if students struggle with any area or any phase associated with us unfolding the case study, what we want to do is reinforce any type of content or knowledge that we can leverage. So let me give you an example. For students that may struggle with the steps, especially our level 1 students or semester 1, they may struggle with understanding really the importance of following a certain sequence whenever they are inserting an NG tube, or even something as simple as doing their assessment. So why is it that we want to auscultate or listen to the abdomen before we palpate? Okay, so it's important for us to help students understand not only the what, so what are the key steps associated with an assessment or with inserting an NG tube, but also the rationale. Kolb's experiential learning theory aligns very nicely with the importance of helping students move through the process. Yes, they start with that concrete experience, but we also know that they have to move through all 4 phases based on Kolb's work in order for learning to happen. So when we look at these 2 elements of Kolb's experiential learning cycle, how is it that we want to fully engage our students in the process? We want to think about the diversity of our learning styles in our classroom. This means that we are going to embrace several different types of teaching strategies. So let's take a look at the examples we have on our screen. First you can see that this student is assumingly getting ready to play a piano or an organ, and that is going to engage in tactile, right? She's going to have hands-on experience, and she's also probably going to receive some guidance from her piano instructor. This is going to help her be able to connect the dots and to better comprehend not only what keys she should play, but she's going to have an increased awareness of what that sound is supposed to be like, or to sound like, right? So what rhythm, what key is she supposed to be in as she touches the different keys on her keyboard? Well, it's the same way in nursing practice. You can see that we have a similar, it looks like she is explaining what is going to happen. Students are watching. Ultimately, they will feel, right? They'll have that hands-on experience in order to fully engage in the learning process. And then this third picture here, you can see that there is a teacher that has students gathered around her. You can see that some of them have pencils in their hands. You can see that there's a lot of observation going on, right? There's a lot of intrigue. Well, from most of the students, we have one student that looks like maybe he's a little bored or maybe he's in deep thought, but there's still quite a bit of active learning that's happening to engage all of the different learning styles and learning preferences that students may have. Well, it's no different in our classroom. Even though the student sitting at a desk, it's at a different level because it's that K through 12. So certainly when we think about pedagogy, there is an increased awareness that the teacher is the expert, right? You're going to learn from me, so pay attention. Well, we also see that there's value of pedagogy and those pedagogical practices in the post K through 12 era, right? So that college level, there's still value in us explaining to students what those steps should be. That's exactly what this instructor is doing. Same way with the piano student. Not only will they explain, but they will demonstrate, right? They will give the student formative feedback based on the sounds that they are playing when they strike each key. How many of you have ever played an instrument? Well, I can't say I really played an instrument. I would say I attempted. And piano was really the instrument that I attempted to play. And I can vividly remember my instructor telling me to listen for the sounds of the keys. Now, I didn't learn to play by ear. I learned to play using, obviously, sheet music. It is a different approach. And ultimately, we end with the same outcome, but it is a different approach. This is a great example of how we as educators, we meet our students where they are. This aligns with competency 2, facilitation of learner socialization, and really the integration of learning. We want to ensure that our students are moving through all 4 of these phases so we can validate that learning has happened. So this is just one example using one image of how we can utilize and really leverage the different teaching strategies that are available to us to bring into the classroom experience. As we're exploring these learning approaches, we want to think about what really is happening at this phase, during this phase of the learning process. Well, we are truly converging. So we're bringing together thought and actual clinical practice. Active conceptualization is going to emphasize that thinking. Students are starting to make sense of what they have actually practiced, had that hands-on feeling experience. They have also watched, right, when they engage in that reflective observation phase. And now they are thinking about, with the active conceptualization phase, they're thinking about what their next steps are going to be as they formulate what approach they should take the next time they have that hands-on experience. We are engaging what's called differentiated instruction for the diverse learning needs. We're thinking about where our students are on those learning cycles or on the learning cycle, and we are considering how we can engage when we have students at that AC level, that abstract conceptualization. We want to support cooperative learning, so we want to bring groups together. We want to engage in simulation so they have a chance to experiment and really try it out. That's the great thing about giving students formative feedback, and the great thing about simulation is there's no risk, right? There's no harm. And it's a great opportunity for students to try out different approaches based on their experience, based on the feedback we've given them to improve their performance. And then next, we think about project-based learning. This is going to help enhance student engagement. Case studies is an example of that. And then remembering that students that are engaging in abstract conceptualization and experimentation, they prefer technical tasks and finding practical solutions. So it has to make sense to them in order for learning to happen. We can tell these students and even show them what the evidence says about the approach that they should take. However, until they have experienced it, reflected on it, received feedback from us, they really don't learn. Okay, so we want to engage these students in a way where they are thinking during the AC level or phase associated with learning and doing, right? That's why they live right here in this converging phase of the process. We want to help move them through that thinking cycle into them understanding what steps they're going to take the next time they have that clinical experience. It's exactly how it sounds, right? We're converging. We're bringing together that past experience, right, that they had when they engaged in concrete experience. And now we are helping them move back through the phases associated with reflective observation and with thinking about what went well, what didn't go so well, as they formulate, what am I going to do differently next time? And then last but not least is thinking about what are these strategies? How are these strategies going to show up for my students? How am I integrating them? Going back to page 35 in Dr. Caputi's book, how am I going to integrate them into my lesson plans? Now that I fully understand the 4 learning phases associated with Kolb, and I also understand that active experimentation is all about thinking. It's all about making sure that I have a mental model that is going to support me being competent with that next clinical experience. And then looking at that last phase, it is all about doing. So how am I going to actively experiment so I can test those ideas? Now we realize in nursing, we don't want to test as much as we are really validating from a clinical standpoint, because we know that's when patient harm can happen. So the actual practice happens oftentimes in the skills lab or in simulation. So students can receive that feedback before they get to the clinical setting where they have a real patient. And so now we're going to go back to our thought-provoking question and take a look and see what your thoughts were and how you did in your response. A group of nursing students is preparing for a complex clinical simulation involving patient care. The instructor wants to tailor her teaching strategy to meet the needs of a student with the converging learning style. Which teaching strategy should the instructor use to effectively engage the student with the converging learning style? All right, so we've done a good review of this content to hopefully validate for you that you did choose the correct answer. So we have A, encouraging participation in reflective journaling and group discussions. B, providing opportunities for hands-on clinical practice and role-playing scenarios. C, assigning problem-solving tasks and case studies to apply theoretical knowledge. All right, so go ahead and write down which option you think is the correct one, remembering 2 thoughts. Number 1, what is this question asking me? And then number 2, what is it that I know for sure about content related to this question? Okay, so if you chose C, give yourselves a round of applause. We have talked about the importance of engaging in scenarios and really practical situations where students are able to walk away and really go through this learning cycle where they can validate what their application would be, what would their clinical decisions be in order to provide the very best patient care. And so give yourselves a round of applause if you did choose the correct answer. And now we're going to wrap up with our content before we close out during this snapshot. The one course, looking at page 35 in Dr. Caputi's review book, it was one concept from a course you teach and draft an instructional plan for moving a learner from a concrete experience at the beginning of the Kolb's experiential learning model to abstract conceptualization. Okay, even before, we didn't even take you all the way through, which is active experimentation. So just thinking about what is a teaching strategy that you're going to use to take students all the way through each of the 4 phases of Kolb's experiential learning cycle. And if you can't get to that 4th one, at least through at least 3 of those phases. All right, so hopefully this snapshot has been helpful, and we look forward to seeing you during our next snapshot, where we will be reflecting on all 4 phases of Kolb experiential learning cycle, and then we're going to move into curriculum. That will be our next focus for our next several snapshots. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions.